A listener question for Pat. What do Andy Serkis's balls taste like?
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name's Tyler Hunt, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just fantastic.
I hear a little sarcasm in your voice.
No, I got a lot of stuff going on right now. I'll be moving soon for work, which is kind of why I've been in and out. We've talked about me being out of town a lot over the summer. So kind of on the verge of a panic attack just from the stress of moving and getting all that stuff in order, but exciting as well. So
yeah, for sure. We're actually recording this. Not that it makes a whole lot of difference to you guys listening, because this will still come out on Monday like they normally do, but we're actually recording this Sunday morning because we were originally going to record it on Friday, and then you texted me, and I thought you were having a panic attack as you were sending that text because it seemed pretty frantic.
It was kind of, well, I texted you as soon as I got off the phone with my boss.
Okay.
Well, I had called Brittany to tell her where we were moving, and then I just started thinking about things and thinking about some of the stuff my boss told me about relocation and the stuff I needed to get in order. And so I was like, oh my God, me and Brittany need to talk about this, and I'm supposed to record the podcast tonight, so that's not going to work. Her and I need to talk through some things and make some plans. So that's why I canceled on you Friday night. Yeah,
just in your text message, from my perspective, it sounded like, so you had, which kind of not really got to choose, but they had kind of led you to believe that it was going to be either Indianapolis or Akron.
Yes.
So you were obviously hoping for Indy. And I hope I'm not giving away anything that you didn't want to discuss on the podcast, but I'm just going to go for it.
As long as we don't talk about what company I work for, we're good.
All right. So, and then the way you phrased it, I was like, well, shit. Like maybe somewhere else, a third city came out of nowhere that you weren't expecting. Because the way you phrased it was like something like you guys had to talk about whether or not you were still going to do it. Like, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
No, just the logistics of... Because the next few weeks are busy as it is with travel, and like I'm going to Seattle for a bachelor party, and so mixing that in with the possibility of moving, and there's just a lot to think through logistically.
Speaking of that, 2 weeks from now we will not have an episode because Tyler will be out of town for the bachelor party that he just mentioned. So just kind of give you guys a heads up. We're going to try real hard to do a Defenders review next week, but that also might not happen either. Or we're definitely going to do an episode next week. Whether or not it's going to be a Defenders review, we have not decided because Tyler's going to be super busy with stuff like he just said. So
yeah, so the next few weeks might be a little different for the podcast just while I work out my life, but we're not going anywhere, and we'll keep going. And
for sure,
yeah, we'll be back on track in no time.
Oh yeah, for sure. So just so you guys are aware, we will be doing it on Skype in the future and whenever he moves in the next few weeks. So the audio might be a little bit different. We're going to try to work out some ways to do it so the audio quality you don't see a drastic drop in audio quality. Hopefully. We had to do an episode a while back when you were working. You were in Dayton at the time, and it wasn't bad. But you could definitely tell, at least I could tell while I was editing it, that you were, obviously I knew you were doing it over Skype. But so hopefully I'm trying to Google some ways to avoid that situation again. But
yeah, which I've listened to podcasts before where they talk over Skype and it's not too distracting. So I don't think that the quality by any means is going to shift. It'll just be a little different, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And your parents still live in Evansville, so you'll be occasionally coming back to Evansville. So occasionally we will have episodes where you're still sitting here. It's going to be a little weird and awkward for a little bit, but hopefully not too long.
We'll get through it.
All right. So if this is your first episode, we start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
I wanted to talk about Rick and Morty because
Okay, cool.
we're a few episodes into season 3. And then also for the first time last night, I played the Rick and Morty Total Recall card game.
Oh, yeah?
So I want to talk about that a little bit as well. So just kind of a Rick and Morty overview. So when this episode comes out Monday, we will have seen another episode tonight. So it'll be 4 episodes into the season. But obviously I can't see into the future, so I can only talk about what's happened so far, which the last episode is what I'm going to kind of focus on, which it was really great. I don't know if you watched it, but it was.
I have not. I watched the premiere when it not really leaked, but when they put it out for that April Fool's thing. So I watched the first episode, but I have not watched the other, I guess, 2 right now that I could have seen.
So you watched the Szechuan sauce episode?
Yes, I have seen that one.
Okay. I'm trying to remember what episode 2 even was. Oh, it's they go to like a Mad Max type area.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which is pretty good. But I'm going to talk about the most recent one, episode 3, which is, I don't know if you've seen the trailers for this season, but it's the episode that has Pickle Rick in it.
I have seen the condoms.
Oh, there's condoms?
Yes, they've made condoms.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
I have not seen those. But so this episode, it's basically, the premise is Rick turns himself into a pickle.
Okay.
As you do. And he ends up going on like this crazy sewer adventure, trying to get back to the lab so he can turn himself back into a human. The whole reason, though, so obviously what you don't see in the trailers or anything is this season has really focused, with at least within the first 3 episodes, on the divorce of Jerry and Beth.
Okay.
And how the family is dealing with it. And it's actually kind of deep in a weird way. And Rick and Morty have had episodes like that in the past where there's like a deeper meaning to the silly humor that's going on.
Yeah, Dan Harmon does that a lot.
Yeah, these episodes, this season in particular, are really like that. So basically, Beth and the kids are going to see a family counselor to just kind of talk through their divorce. And Rick does not want to go so bad that he turns himself into a pickle. And he has this rig to where a timer is going to go off, and then a syringe is going to drop into him and turn him back into a human. And Beth takes the syringe because they're kind of going back and forth on if he turned himself into a pickle to purposefully get out of going to counseling, or if he was just doing, his normal Rick stuff. And of course, he was trying to get out of counseling. But it's funny because he ends up falling off the workbench and falls down into the sewer, and he ends up like making a makeshift like exoskeleton out of rat parts that he kills, and it gets crazy. And there's like a lot of rat killing where it almost was uncomfortable at how gory it was. Kind of, it reminded me of what South Park does sometimes. It just gets uncomfortably gross. So I wasn't as much of a fan of that part of the episode, but the overall premise was really hilarious. And Pickle Rick is definitely one of my favorite episodes of the series thus far. So this season's definitely off to a good start. I will say, I talked about Rick and Morty last summer. I talked about it when we did our top 10 favorite TV shows. This is the first time I've watched it episode to episode, though, because whenever I got into it, the first 2 seasons were already done, so I binged it. I will say that it has a different feel when you watch it week to week. And I've noticed that with other shows, too. There's something different about when you binge a show, how you kind of feel about it. I don't know if you've had that happen with you at all and on any of the shows you watch, but watching it week to week is a little different. And I don't want to say it takes away from the show, but it's not as fun being able to go from episode to episode. And then, there's some episodes that don't hit as well as others, but you just go on to the next one and there's usually something hilarious in it. So not having that option with season 3 has been a little different for me.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm going to wait until all of the episodes come out to watch it, but I didn't do that on purpose at all. It just so happened that I'm watching other things right now. And so just a couple episodes got away from me. So I'm definitely going to go back and watch it. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed that they would I wouldn't expect a show like Rick and Morty that's so original to kind of go into the cliche of a pickle killing rats. And that's been done 1,000 times.
There is a funny part where he ends up in a jail and somebody's helping him, and it's like this cliche action hero type person who's voiced by Danny Trejo.
Of course it is.
And the episode gets absurd if turning yourself into a pickle is not absurd enough. But it was
Why do you choose a pickle?
I don't know, but it's pretty funny. It starts off with Morty in the bathroom, and he hears Rick calling him, and Yeah, you just need to watch it. It's definitely my favorite episode of the 3 so far, and there's a reason why there's pickle merchandise being made for that particular episode.
I've just seen condoms.
So it leads me to really quick. I'll go through the Total Recall card game. So the thing about Rick and Morty is they have, they're shorter seasons, but there's episodes that really hit with people.
Yep.
And, merchandise spins out of one episode. So like Pickle Rick has merchandise, and then there's a Total Recall card game from the show or the episode that's called Total Recall, which is the episode where the parasites are invading, I guess, their brains in their house and putting memories in about these wacky characters. And of course is the introduction of Mr. Poopy Butthole, which is a very popular character. But they made a card game based on it where you have to every card. It's hard to explain without like having the cards in front of you. So it's basically just a card game where you're trying to find out who's a parasite, who's not, and you have action cards where you can kill characters. And if you kill 4 real people, you lose. So you can work cooperatively. Then there's also an advanced mode where everybody has a character in front of them that they are, and you can either be a parasite or a real person. So you can be working secretly against the group or for the parasites. And there's rules and rules and rules that go into it that I won't go into here, obviously. But it's a lot of fun. It's a fun card game, and it's funny that such a fun game spun out of one 30-minute episode of Rick and Morty. So I was really impressed because my wife got it for me last Christmas, and that's whenever it was out of print. And it wasn't like grossly expensive, but it was probably like $30. And I was really surprised she got it for me and was very ecstatic. But luckily it's back in print now, and I think you can get it on Amazon for like $10. So it's a pretty cool game, and I suggest you guys check it out.
For sure. Unfortunately, my wife is not a huge fan of Rick and Morty, so I don't see us playing that game all that much. But I tried to play it a couple of weeks ago when we went over to your house to play board games. I suggested us playing it, and then we just never got around to it.
Yeah, hopefully before I hit the bricks,
because you're leaving and you're never coming back.
Because I'll never see you again in person. We can have another game night, because what was fun about that night, and we talked about in the last episode, is there were so many games we wanted to play, and we didn't even get through all of them. So.
You have a lot lot of games.
Yeah, not a lot of friends.
That's
a lot of board games and a lot of friends to play with.
That's to be expected. Working at a retail store.
Yeah, I mean,
being into board games as well.
What's funny is we went to Toys R Us that night before you guys came over, and I bought, Brittany bought that Trivial Pursuit we played because she loves that. I bought the Star Wars Trivial Pursuit, and we bought Taboo. So we bought like 3 games that night, and then there's stuff that you just I accumulated over the years, and Brittany had as well. So, one of the big steps in marriage is combining your board games. So yeah,
for sure.
All right, man, that's a lot about Rick and Morty and board games. What are you into?
So I went and saw Annabelle Creation on Friday instead of us recording. I was actually planning on going to see it before we recorded anyways. But it actually worked out because I was like, when we record, obviously we try to prep some notes here and there. So I was just going to be like right off the cuff, just kind of talking about this movie if we had recorded on Friday. So I was able to kind of get some thoughts together. Not that it's going to be any more articulate than they usually are, but so Annabelle Creation is a prequel to the first Annabelle film, which is kind of weird because the Annabelle film is a prequel to the Conjuring film, so it's kind of strange, a prequel to a prequel. But it was directed by David F. Sandberg, who is a director I didn't really know a whole lot about, but apparently he wrote and directed Lights Out, which I don't think we formally reviewed on the podcast as like a main topic, but I know that we talked about it because we both saw it together. I thought that film had a really cool concept. Unfortunately, it kind of got bogged down by trying to build the mythology because it's based on a short film, which is like 2 minutes long. Super cool. I really like the short film quite a lot. But like I said, the movie, when you kind of stretch that cool concept out to however long it is, like close to 2 hours, it gets more bogged down by the mythology. And I think that this film also kind of had I've said this with other horror films, is sometimes, especially with monster or ghost films, you kind of, when you show the monster or the ghost a lot, you kind of take away its power, and Lights Out did that a lot. Like, you see the monster in the first 15 minutes of the movie. So I think that they definitely, unfortunately, blew their load pretty early in Lights Out. And maybe that's just his style, because he does that in a lot in Annabelle Creation. You see the demon quite a lot in this movie. And that's another reason why I don't like the Insidious movies. Like, I know a lot of people love those movies, and I never really got into it because you see the monster a lot in Insidious, and I think the monster looks ridiculous. It looks just like a gold Darth Maul. So, I don't think that that's an effective way to do horror movies, because you kind of take the power away from the creature. And so I didn't quite like that in Annabelle Creation, because they did that quite a lot. Don't get me wrong. This movie is like the fucking Babadook compared to the first one. Because after you get past the first scene in the original Annabelle movie, it's basically just a fucking dumpster fire. Like, that movie's horrible. I hated it so much. But this is the perfect example of how I think you should use Rotten Tomatoes. Because normally, we've talked about this a lot, we don't pay too much attention to Rotten Tomatoes with movies that we know we're going to review, because we don't want that to creep into our review.
Yeah.
But this is a movie that I am a huge horror fan, so I'm interested in any horror movie that comes out. It doesn't take too much convincing for me to go see one of these movies, but because I hated Annabelle so much, that when I found out that they were making another one, I was like, okay, whatever. I just rolled my eyes, like, I'm not going to go see that movie. But then Rotten Tomatoes, the reviews started coming out, and I think I posted on our Facebook and our Instagram and all that good stuff, which you should definitely check out, a screenshot. I think at the time it was like 83%. I was like blown away by it. Now, of course, that was like 25 reviews. I think by the time I saw it on Friday, it was down to like 68% or something like that, but still fresh. And I can actually understand why. It's really interesting. I think that it's a really well-made movie. I thought it had some great camera work. I mean, he definitely knows how to move around the camera. The atmosphere was really cool. The music, kind of the cinematography. I will say that it started to kind of show a little bit of a pattern. And some movies, especially horror movies, do this when you knew something was about to happen, because it went completely quiet in the movie. Like, the music was always in the background, and I really liked the score in this movie, but when they were trying to get you, the music would go completely silent. And when that happens more than once in a movie, I was like, okay, the music, there's nothing going on right now. So something's the shit's about to hit the fan. So I thought that was it kind of showed their hand a little bit towards the end of the movie, because you knew something was going to happen when the music cut out. It actually had pretty decent acting for the horror genre. Historically doesn't have the best track record as far as acting. I thought the acting was pretty good. Unfortunately, the movie itself was kind of just a series of tropes, a lot of those really annoying horror genre tropes that we've talked a lot about in the past. This movie had one of the worst tropes that I think a horror movie can have, and the genre has kind of gotten away from it in the last 10, 15 years, but in older horror movies, when you watch them, there's danger at night, but you're safe in the daytime. And this movie does that so much, except for maybe one case that kind of starts the beginning of the third act. That's exactly what this movie is. So they're safe at the daytime, and then when they start getting ready for bed, you're like, okay, here we go. Those breaks get shorter and shorter as the movie goes along. We talked about with our Conjuring 2 review that movie is kind of relentless. Like, it gives you short breaks in the beginning of the movie, but towards the end, the last about 45 minutes of that movie is just straight horror the entire time. That movie is relentless. I wouldn't say it goes quite that far in this movie, but the breaks do get shorter and shorter as the movie goes on, but it definitely has that trope of the characters are safe in the daytime, so as soon as they wake up, you're good for 5-10 minutes. So that was a little bit disappointing, because, like I said, the genre has kind of gotten away from that in the last 10-15 years, and I feel like they took a step back in this movie. There's several jump scares, which I am not a fan of. Yeah. There were some effective scenes in this particular movie. I do like, there's a particular scene, and it's not something that I haven't seen before, but I thought that they did a really good job with it, especially with the sound editing. I thought was really impressive. Basically, this character, all these characters move into this house, and it's the guy's house he was a toy maker. So he has all these like cool older toys. And one of the toys they have is like this gun that he made that shoots this ball and it's at the end of the string. And one of the characters kind of finds it and uses it to protect herself against this monster. And so she's sitting in the bedroom and she's shooting the ball down the hall. And all of a sudden, of course, she shoots it and then she can't get it to come back because the demon has it. Yeah. And so I thought that was actually really effective scene. I really liked how they built that scene, but I kind of saw what was going to happening, but that's fine. I thought it was still really well done. So there's some effective scenes in this movie, but like I said, it was just kind of a series of tropes, and the third act was just kind of a mess. So basically, I don't think that they knew exactly where they wanted to go with this movie. Like, they had this really cool idea. They had this really talented director who knew how to move the camera around and set a really cool atmosphere. But as far as the third act was concerned, it just felt like they didn't quite know what they were going to do with it, because at a certain point, one of the girls is basically just running from room to room, and there's a different thing that she's running from. And there's a girl that's chasing her and trying to murder her because she's been possessed. Then there's a demon in this other room, and then there's this lady who's kind of been possessed as well. So it's just like, it felt like they were kind of just throwing a bunch of shit up against the wall and see what sticks. And so I thought that they had a really cool concept and they had some really good stuff about the movie, but they just didn't know where to take especially that third act is just kind of a mess.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely sounds like there are things that could be improved with this movie, but the fact that they were able to make a prequel to Annabelle, which was, like you said, a shit show, and make it have some type of redeeming qualities is impressive to me.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Annabelle is god-awful, and this movie was not on my radar at all until it started getting good reviews. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'll see it eventually. I know Brittany wants to see it, so we'll probably try to catch it in theaters. But if not, maybe Shocktober if it's out on Blu-ray by then. But, yeah, I'm impressed that they were able to salvage this story, I guess.
So later in the episode, we're going to do some listener questions. We got some good questions this time around, but I also thought it would be kind of fun. I do go on AskReddit occasionally, and I just browse it every once in a while. And so I got a few questions from AskReddit for that particular segment. One that didn't quite make the cut, and I just thought it was funny. I was looking at it this morning, was what's your favorite horror movie, or what's the scariest movie you've ever seen? And I was just browsing because obviously I'm a huge horror fan. I was just curious what other people's answers were. I was hoping to see a lot of Babadook because that would be my answer, to be honest with you. But there was a couple of people that said Annabelle Creation. I was like, no, like, come on. Then you've never seen any other horror movie ever if this movie is the scariest movie you've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that's it's on the tip of their brain.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But still, like, come on. Put some thought into it.
It's a decent movie. I would say that I would give it a 3, but it'd be a real soft 3, because I do recommend somebody seeing this, especially if you're a fan of The Conjuring and you're a fan of the universe which it exists in. But I mean, I'm probably never going to see it again. Like, I've seen it once and I know what happens. And like I said, that third act is kind of a mess. So I probably will never see it again, but there's some really effective scenes in the movie. And I really think that the guy that directed it, David F. Sandberg, is really talented. He definitely knows how to shoot a movie. I just don't think that the script did him a whole lot of favors.
Well, his next film is Shazam. So
okay, so I did not know that.
Yeah, so he's I think he's writing it too.
Okay, that'll be interesting. I mean, I think he wrote Lights Out too, and that wasn't a super effective movie.
No.
So
yeah, but we'll see.
All right, cool, man. So our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two each week. So what'd you read this week?
I read a new Image comic. It's number 1, and that is Redlands, number 1. So I've said it a million times on the podcast, but I'm a big fan of monsters if they're done right. So I've talked a lot about werewolves, and then you have vampires. And one thing that I haven't talked too much about but I've always found interesting is the concept of witches and witchcraft if it's done right, like actual scary witches, like maybe Blair Witch type stuff, as opposed to hocus pocus type witches. So that being said, witches are not often done right. and they usually come across campy, or they're using kids stories. I know that the movie The Craft has its following and people that like it.
Unfortunately.
But that movie's awful, and that's one of the only adult themed witch movies I can think of besides like Blair Witch. So, and in Blair Witch, you don't even see the creature until that sequel they made. So, witches haven't been done a whole lot, but this comic is centered on the idea of witches, and that's what caught my attention about it, because it's an adult horror book. So basically this book starts off, it's in 1977, Redlands, Florida, and a bunch of deputies are barricaded inside a police station as basically everything outside is on fire. And we find out through the comic that they had tried to burn a few women for being witches and that they had escaped. This is like the one plot hole that kind of made me take a step back from this book, because why would you be burning witches in 1977? I feel like we were more civilized by then, and there's like a court of law, but maybe we'll find out the backstory there as the issues go on. But that did kind of catch me off guard. But anyways, they were burning witches, as you do, and the witches escaped. So the deputies are in this jailhouse, and they're terrified and trying to decide what to do, while all the prisoners are, of course, behind bars and are heckling them, which is kind of a cool scene. The rest of the comic kind of unfolds and shows how these particular events are happening, and things get pretty gruesome pretty quick. So I won't spoil anything in case any of you guys want to read it, because I am going to recommend it. It's written by Jordi Belair and drawn by Vanessa Del Rey, and they were both creatively involved in this, like every step of the way, because it was weird. I've never seen this before. Jordi Belair wrote it, but he or she, I don't know if it's male or female, also inked it.
Okay.
While Vanessa Del Rey helped create it. It was like created by them both, but she drew it. So obviously this is the I almost said love child of these two, but that's going to come across weird if they're not in a relationship. But it's their brainchild. So I think that these two are a great team, because the horror is written really well and the art matches the tone of the book masterfully. The art especially captures the horrific facial expressions and the violent actions really well as it's kind of unfolding on the page. I'm really excited to see where this book goes, because it was definitely a quick read, because so much is going on. Not a lot of dialogue, just a lot of cruelty. I was going
to say, that's not a word.
And, as we creep closer to Halloween, this is something that I want to stay close to. So definitely going to stick with this book, but I'm excited to see how they build the universe around what just happened in issue 1. So that's going to be the real telltale if I keep with it or not.
Yeah, it sounds interesting, but I'm, unlike you, not really all that interested in witches. Like you said, they're not done very well historically, so I'm not that interested.
I just had like a flashback to my childhood, and I think I know why witches intrigue me.
Oh, yeah?
So this is fucking weird. I've repressed this memory.
You got molested.
No, I got molested by a witch. When I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. So still pretty young. I had all of these group of friends that lived in the neighborhood that I lived in with my parents, and everybody said that there was this kid in the neighborhood that like we never saw, that was a witch, and like they did seances and stuff. And I remember we had like a tree house, and one day we went back up to the tree house just playing or whatever, and there were candles in it. And I was terrified that like this kid was like the people were practicing witchcraft around us. And of course, now that I'm grown up, I look back on that, it's really fucking silly. And maybe there were some kids lighting candles and trying to be goth, but of course, witchcraft isn't real. But it terrified me when I was younger, and that's probably where that interest comes from.
Yeah, when I used to live in Belfast, I had a neighbor who had a treehouse, and I would go up there and try to pee on moss off the side. So similar.
Yeah, similar. Very similar.
All right. I never thought that I was going to ever share that story ever.
Why would you try to pee on moss?
I don't know.
All right, cool.
Because I was in the treehouse. What else are you going to do in a treehouse?
I don't know. Get to second base.
In a way, I did.
With the moss. All right. What did you read?
So I read a Star Wars kind of mini series. I don't know if it's going to be like a one shot or if it's going to be something that they're going to have ongoing for a while. It's Star Wars Rogue One, Cassian and K2SO. I really loved Rogue One. Obviously, we reviewed it, and I said this, and I think it's kind of one of the best compliments you can give to this movie is it changed the way that I watch these films, because there's a lot of argument between Star Wars fans, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. How do you watch these films? You watch the original trilogy, and if you want to hate yourself, then you go back to the prequels. But I think that you watch Rogue One first from now on, because it's so good, and then it leads so well into a New Hope. And in that movie, in Rogue One, K2 definitely stole the show. And this book is basically just his origin story, because they don't give you a ton in the original, in Rogue One, the film. And so I really like the fact that they went back and kind of given his backstory. They do have a Rogue One adaptation comic out right now. I didn't read it because I had heard some really bad things. I don't think that they do the adaptations very well. Like, I really do like most of the Star Wars books that Marvel has been putting out, but I didn't hear good things about Force Awakens adaptation, and I didn't hear good things about Rogue One, so I haven't read either one of those. Unfortunately, this book kind of started off on the wrong foot. It started off with a flash forward, which is not always bad, but is definitely something that is really, really overused.
Yeah.
And what I thought was funny about this particular book is Cassian is talking to someone at the beginning in the flash forward, and it's obvious that he's talking to K2. So obvious. But they hide
who he's
K2, who he's talking to. And I mean, it's the only... it's the most obvious explanation who he's talking to. So that really bugged me. So not only did they do a really cliche flash forward thing at the beginning of this book, but they tried to hide who he was talking to. It was obvious who he was talking to. But once you get past that, I like that this book is K2's origin, because you don't get a lot of that in Rogue One for good reason. I mean, he's just kind of there for somewhat of comic relief, and I think that the fact that he's not overly used in that movie, I think definitely works to its advantage. And so I think that that's a cool way to use these books, is to kind of give it background information but still tell a really good story, which I think that they did in this particular book. The story is pretty much what you would expect. I think there's a couple of really interesting characters that help Cassian in this book. They kind of expand the Star Wars universe with these comic books, and I think that makes for really interesting stories. I like the fact that it's basically just K2's journey from being an Imperial droid to the character that we see in Rogue One. It's a pretty fun little journey. It's not going to blow you away, but if you're looking for more K2 stuff, because obviously we're not going to get more of that.
Spoilers.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I think this might be a one-shot, but I wouldn't be mad about it if it wasn't.
Yeah, that was one of the big things from Rogue One that I was really still curious about, because obviously he's an Imperial droid, but they rewired him or whatever to...
and you see that in this book.
Yeah, so that was the big kind of question I had from that book, was how did that happen? How did they get together? And so it makes sense that they would make this comic.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. You ready for nerd news?
Yeah, what do you got this week?
All right. So it was actually a bigger week than what we've had since Comic-Con. The first is pretty brief, but kind of cool. They are making a Judge Dredd TV show, which we have talked about previously. And the question was, could they possibly even get Carl Urban for this? Because, of course, his Dredd movie was very well received, and fans want to see him come back as a character. The show's called Judge Dredd Mega City 1, and he said that he'd be interested in coming back. That does by no means means that they're going to get him, because I'm sure that he comes with a price tag, but it'd be cool to see. So
yeah, I think that it would be the way to go, for sure. I really think that movie is underrated. I think that it's really, really solid movie. I'm not huge into Judge Dredd, but it's definitely a character I think is cool. I think it could lend itself to a really cool TV show.
Yeah.
And so I would hope that they would kind of build off the success of Dredd. I don't know how well it did in the box office, but I really, really like that movie quite a lot. And so I think that he made kind of a perfect Judge Dredd for somebody that's not like I said, versed in the mythology of the character. Thought that he did a really good job with it. And I think he's kind of the perfect actor to get to go to a TV show because he's not super well known. It's not like you're getting a big movie star to go to a TV show, which historically they don't really do. So I think that he would be a good fit for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of what he's even been in since the last Star Trek movie. And then I know he's in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
But he's like a side character, he's not anything that's going to carry any weight in the movie from what I understand. So yeah, he could probably go to TV now.
Yeah, but we're still a really long way away from that.
Yeah,
that TV show and the possibility of him being in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Netflix acquired Millar World, which is Mark Millar's company. So where he puts like Kick-Ass and Kingsman and Wanted, all of that stuff out through. So they acquired it, I'm assuming, to develop creative properties out of it. I'm not sure how that's going to work because obviously certain movie studios have rights to certain things. Like they've made Kick-Ass, they've made Wanted, they've made Kingsman. So I know Mark Millar has done a lot of comics. So I'm sure that there's other stuff that hasn't been tapped. And I'm curious how Netflix will work around that. But that was like one of their first big acquisitions. So
yeah, it seems like obviously they couldn't like make a Kick-Ass 3 or anything like that because they don't own the rights to that. But anything, like you said, that he hasn't done or he hasn't sold the rights to, I would assume by this deal that they are free to make whatever they want out of it.
You would think so. So we'll see. Let's see. Speaking of Netflix, David Letterman has a new show coming to Netflix, which I thought was weird because he's retired, but I guess retirement's not suiting him very well. Apparently it's going
Either
to
is that beard.
Yeah, we'll see if he shaves it for this show. Apparently it's only like a 6 to 8 episode order, and he's going to do interviews, of course, but it'd also be him doing things out in the world. I guess the way I kind of read it was like maybe how Mr. Rogers used to like go out and do things,
So there's going to be puppets?
Hopefully. But I don't know. There's been other shows like that where, you go out and you see how something's made or do something wacky where he can make jokes. So I'm excited to see him not just kind of go off into death.
Yeah.
Like, might as well do something. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'll be honest, I was never super into his show.
I liked it. I watched it when I was in high school here and there. I'm not a huge talk show guy anyways, but I would occasionally catch it here and there. I think it's not all that surprising that he would want to come back because guys like that have been doing something for so long, it's like once they get out of retirement and they get to relax a little bit, I'm sure that they get the itch.
Yeah.
And all my beard jokes notwithstanding, but he probably just got that itch and wanted to do something creative again. And this is kind of it sounds like the perfect partnership because he can do 8 episodes or whatever it was, 6 to 8 episodes. And if that satisfies him, awesome. And he wants to continue, that's awesome. But if not, he got to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll see I don't know when, I'm assuming it'll come out next year. Let's see. Speaking of streaming, Disney is going to be releasing their own streaming service to compete with, I guess, Netflix and Hulu. And there's been a lot of questions as to whether or not they're going to pull everything from Netflix and Hulu. Obviously, it sounds like they're pulling their animated movies and the movies that they've produced, like live action as well, that they've produced. But the question is kind of lies around Marvel and Star Wars. Yeah. And Netflix said they were in active negotiations to try to keep those on Netflix, of course, because I'm sure like Rogue One's on Netflix, which is crazy to me because I think that's the first Star Wars movie I've seen that's streaming on a service like that. And then, they have the Netflix TV shows. So it sounds like those are staying as well. And Netflix will be able to keep doing seasons of those shows. But I mean, this kind of makes sense. At this point, Disney has such a vast catalog since they've own Marvel and they own Star Wars and of course all the stuff they've made. Because I don't know, I would assume that Touchstone Pictures at one time was a part of Disney, so I don't know if they still own those movies or not. But they could put together a hefty collection and then charge a fee for it. So
would you buy it?
I don't think I would unless I guess the the rumor is that they would launch it with a live action Star Wars TV show.
Oh, really?
It would only be available on that service. So, of course, kind of like what CBS is doing with Star Trek.
Yep.
So if they did that, it was like, all right, well, fuck, I got to do it because I got to watch the show. But if it's just their catalog, honestly, I think that, I mean, I'm still collecting on physical media, even though it's dying. And so I have most of the movies I'd want to watch. Like I have Star Wars, I have all the Marvel movies, so I wouldn't really need it.
For sure. And I kind of feel the same way, but I'm also very, very lazy. So it's easy. I literally, if I want to watch a movie that I own, a lot of times I will look on Netflix.
I'm guilty of that. Like I watched Gremlins this morning and I own that on Blu-ray, but it was literally right there. So
yeah,
I streamed it instead. So yeah, that's how lazy I am too. Let's see. I got two more things. One of them, or both of them are quick. So, just the Fantastic Four comic. There was some news that came out about that and kind of verified what we've been speculating on the podcast for quite some time now, which was Disney pretty much pulled the plug on the Fantastic Four comic over movie rights.
Yep.
So I guess I've read multiple articles, and one of the articles said something that I thought was really interesting, which was that the movie was so bad that it was hurting their brand. And Disney does. But
they pulled it before the movie even came out.
Did they?
Yeah.
Maybe they had heard or something. But yeah, that's why they canceled Fantastic Four. Put the decision higher up was because movie rights and so on and so forth. Which, I mean, there's still X-Men comics. There's still X-Men merchandise being made.
Yeah, but there's not as much. They've definitely made an effort to pimp the Inhumans and kind of take away the X-Men. Like,
for sure.
Literally in the Marvel comic universe, the X-Men are dying and more Inhumans are being created because of this mist. So, I mean, it's not a very subtle way that they're going about this. So it's pretty clear to anybody that reads all these comics that they're trying to pimp these Inhumans because they own the rights to them. And so they can make this TV show and all this good stuff.
Yeah, so, I mean, that just kind of confirmed what we had assumed.
Yeah, for sure.
And then this last story, kind of just for me, I don't know how you feel about this show, so maybe it's for you too. But I guess they had the, what do they call it, like the television upfronts, maybe?
Sweeps?
No, not sweeps. It was like I don't know, all the networks kind of announced what they were doing this week and the week before, and that's kind of where we talked the last episode about NBC wants to revive The Office and 30 Rock, yada, yada, yada. Fox talked about a show that they want to bring back, which I'm a huge fan of and think was extremely underrated when it was on, and that's King of the Hill.
Okay.
And that shocked me because obviously that show like hung on forever, and every year it was like, are they going to renew it? Are they going to cancel it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, it finally ran its course, and it had a pretty decent run. But I think over the last few years, people have, I don't want to say have rediscovered it, but there's a lot of memes from like King of the Hill and that kind of stuff. So there is an interest there. And I think people are starting to appreciate the humor of that show a little bit more now. So it makes sense that they'd want to bring it back. But obviously they said Mike Judge and Greg Daniels are both very busy right now, but it's something that they've talked to them about once or twice and they might do down the road.
I have watched an episode of that show. I would say maybe a handful of episodes. I was just never all that interested in it.
What's funny, I think at your bachelor party when we were playing poker at your apartment at the time, it was either on the TV or we were talking about it.
I know my buddy Jeff, who was the best man at my wedding, is a big King of the Hill fan. Yeah. He's probably listening to this right now, actually.
So this one's for you, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, we have a listener question from Jeff. So we're going to hear from Jeff in a little bit.
Can't wait.
But so I think that's probably why we were talking about it.
Yeah, it's just that show did a lot. It did a lot of stuff on an animated show that is being done, of course, on tons of shows now, but it was kind of ahead of its time a little bit. So I definitely miss that show. And if it's unfortunately not on Netflix and it's not on Hulu, otherwise I'd probably rewatch it.
Okay, cool.
That is what I have for nerd news, my man.
All right. So like we've been saying a couple of times, our main topic this week, since there's really not a whole lot that has come out this week as far as TV or movies, we're going to do another listener question segment. We did this a while back and it was a lot of fun. So it's kind of the perfect week to give it another go because there's not a whole lot coming out this week. And I think we got some good ones for you guys or from you guys. Yeah. So Jeff's question, like I pimped earlier, he sent this via text a while back. I'm assuming he's referencing the episode where we reviewed War for the Planet of the Apes. He says, a listener question for Pat. What do Andy Serkis's balls taste like?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Sweaty marshmallows is, I think is what my answer to him was. So yeah, I, do tend to, jerk him off quite often in a movie that he's in, or just in general.
It's good that if you jerk him off, that you're paying attention to his balls.
Oh yeah, for sure. You'll have to.
That's much appreciated.
Yeah, you have to work the balls every once in a while. So I believe your
story.
That's going to be the title of my autobiography. You got to work the balls
every once in a while.
So I believe your wife submitted a question too.
Yeah, she did. She wanted to know, why is Tyler so damn cute?
Oh yeah. So what's your answer? Like,
I don't know, genetics, or she had to say that because she signed a marriage contract. I don't know. I think she goes, can I ask a question on the podcast? I'm like, yeah, sure. You should email it. She goes, can I ask why Tyler's so cute? And it's like, oh, that's not a real question. But
you should have recorded her, and we could have cut that in there, like professional podcasters.
Oh no, we're not that.
So let's go ahead and get right to the actual question.
The real ones.
So we got a few good ones this year, or this time around, and I'm excited to see what you have to say about that. Some of them.
Cool.
So the first one's from Damien. I'm assuming it's Damien that I knew from work that I used to work with. If that's the case, I miss you, bro.
I'm assuming that it's Damien from The Omen. So
I don't think so. I don't think it's Satan. Anyways, and I thought this was a really good question because we do talk a lot on this podcast about playing video games and watching movies and TV and all that good stuff. And so he asked, how do you balance all of your nerdy passions? Which is something that we've discussed a few times on the podcast, and we kind of got into it a little bit at Indie PopCon with Sigmund from Sigmund Gaming. We touched on this a little bit. It's very, very stressful.
Yeah.
We kind of just ignore our wives and family and friends. A lot of times, it's tough. It's tough to be, I've never been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I have ADD. Like, it's hard for me to concentrate on one thing. I have the bad habit, especially with video games, where I just want to jump to the new thing. Yeah. And sometimes I don't sit and let a game or a TV show really kind of take hold of me because I just want to jump to the next thing. So I definitely have a problem, and maybe I should better balance it, but I'm always jumping to the new thing. And it's just, especially with TV too, I have a hard time rewatching stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, there's so much that I want to watch that I just feel like I need to jump to the next thing. So maybe I'm not the best person to answer this question because I do have a hard time with it, but it's just, I don't have kids. So that certainly helps. And, I sit around because I do watch a lot of stuff, and obviously I'm sitting around while I do it, but it seems like I'm always just doing something. And I like that. I like that I'm always doing something. That's just how I work as a human. I feel like I need to be doing something all the time. And this is something that I'm passionate about. So it's not like it feels like, I got to put in 3 hours on this video game. No, it's just, I obviously enjoy doing it. So
yeah, for me, I think, unfortunately, as I've gotten older, it's just been about prioritization, because I can't watch and do everything I want to all at the same time like I used to, or as fast as I used to, maybe. An example that comes to mind is I really want to watch Ozark.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But I've just not had time, and I've been watching other stuff, and it's definitely on my list of things to do, and I will watch it. But whereas, a few years ago, I would have just binged it in a weekend, given the circumstances going on in my life and being an adult and having more responsibility. I can't just do that. So it's something that I'll get around to, but I find myself gravitating towards quicker things. Like, I watched Glow pretty quick. That was, 30-minute episodes. And
sure.
Just kind of prioritizing what I want to do and when. Like, unfortunately, some things kind of take the back seat, like video games, in some movies that I would have saw in theaters 5 years ago, but now I just kind of wait to come out on demand or Netflix or whatever. So unfortunately, you have to pick and choose. and it's not always the easiest as you get older, but it's definitely possible to keep those nerdy passions alive.
Yeah, and there's some definitely some give and take, because there's things that I want to get into that I'm just like, there's no fucking way between all the stuff that I watch as far as movies and TV and the video games, because I've really gotten into video games. Not that I was ever really got away from them, but there was a couple of years where I was like, oh yeah, I'm a huge gamer. Oh, what do you play? Halo and Madden, pretty much it. And so the past year, and obviously the YouTube channel helped a lot with that, doing just Let's Plays for all these different games. But I'm playing Destiny right now, and I never got around to playing that before. And I'm playing that for fun. I'm not playing that for the YouTube channel. So I've definitely gotten more into that recently, but that means that I haven't been playing Dice Masters, or I haven't been doing other things that I kind of wanted to get into. And I've had to cut back a little bit on the comic books. I've talked about that in the last couple of weeks, where I've definitely had to be a little bit more cutthroat with my comic books, what I pick up each week, because I've been getting more into gaming, and there's only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the same boat with you.
All right, so the next question that we got was from Alex, which I'm pretty sure also a guy that I work with. I get a lot of people from my work into the podcast.
All of our listeners are people that work with Pat.
Yeah, pretty much. And this is just kind of a general question. What old game, like old video game, I'm assuming is what he's referring to, would you like to see remastered? I know this is a popular question on Reddit, which again, I peruse every once in a while. And I think this is a popular answer, so I guess I'm going with the most obvious answer. But I really, really enjoyed the Lord of the Rings games. Historically, video games based on movies aren't that good, but I really, really liked the Two Towers games, and I really, really liked The Return of the King. Was just a fantastic video game. So I really think that those are games that they could remaster, and I think it's definitely one that they could just do, kind of like what they did with Metal Gear Solid HD, is where they could just put all three games on one game, not sell them individually, which game companies generally try to do, get the most money out of something. But I think that they could definitely come up with like a Lord of the Rings HD collection, and that would sell out, because I know that it's definitely an obvious answer, because people are definitely clamoring for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I might have actually played Return of the King.
It's a really, really fun game.
Yeah, I think I did, which was surprising, because I didn't really even like Lord of the Rings that much. But I mean, I used to have so much more time on my hands, so I would have played a game like that. For me, I don't know. It seems like the kind of track record of the last few years is that there have been a lot of games remade. So, whereas I would have maybe said, oh, the Arkham games, those got upgraded. So did Resident Evil 4, which I played and still love. So it's a harder thing to think about. This game has probably been upgraded to high definition at some point, but it's not available on Xbox. So I'm going to say GoldenEye.
Okay.
Just from a nostalgia point of view. So I would love to play that again. I remember that I tried to play it probably like 10 years ago. And even 10 years ago, it was hard to play, because you forget how terrible the graphics are till you go back to that system, the Nintendo 64, and play something. So I would like to see it brought up to scale.
Yeah, I just recently, not to bring up the YouTube channel again, but I recently started doing Throwback Thursday videos.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun, because it's just basically just kind of switches it up a little bit. So it's not always just the same game that I'm playing, whatever I'm playing at the time. And it's fun for me, because I get to play some of these older games that I had kind of forgotten about it. And just recently, the last couple of weeks, I've been playing Wolfenstein 3D, which is a game I've talked about this a lot in the past, is we're not big PC gamers, you or I, but I did play this game on PC, and I've one of the only PC games I ever beat, because I just wasn't a PC gamer at all. And I really loved it, and it's a lot of fun, but the graphics are horrible. They're good for a PC game that I think came out in like 92, 93, somewhere in that range. So they're actually pretty decent for that time. Of course, it got remastered, so I'm sure they touched it up a little bit. But yeah, that game's been a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right, so the last one that I have before we'll move into the AskReddit questions, and this is a big one for us. Gavin is asking, where do I start with comic collecting? So, yeah, that's a big one. And I've actually gotten this question quite a few times from friends that are looking to get into it. And I would say, don't, just from the money aspect, if you want to throw a lot of money. Now, of course, I kid. I mean, we really enjoy, reading comic books for sure, but it's just, it's a rabbit hole for sure, because I would say if there's characters that you like and there's multiple books, just pick one book and just stick with that, because you're not going to be able to get all of them. I think a long time ago when Amazing X-Men came out, this was years ago. I think I brought it up on the podcast for one of my comics that week. And I mentioned that there's at that time, there was 6 X-Men books that were ongoing. And I just picked Amazing X-Men and I just went with it. No matter what happened, of course it kind of got weird and I didn't really like it that much. And so I ended up dropping it, but that was my X-Men book. And I think that's the best way to do it, is especially right now. If you're a big TMNT fan, there's several TMNT books. Just pick one and just go with it. At this point, if you're not reading TMNT, just probably go with TMNT Universe, because it only has 9 or 10 issues right now. But, and the main book has 73, but that would be my biggest suggestion, is just kind of pick a few and just stick with those, especially if there's multiple books for that same character. And I would say that it really kind of depends on what you're looking to do. If you're just if you're not going to read as much and you're just kind of trying to collect, then that's fine. I don't see the purpose of that, but I mean, if that's what you want to do, then that's cool too. There's plenty of books that, obviously there's 20 or 30 that come out each week. So you definitely could, gather quite a collection pretty quickly. But, if you're just looking to read, I would just definitely suggest picking out one book, picking out a few characters that you really care about, and just going from there.
Yeah, I would say something very similar. I mean, if you're genuinely looking to get into comic books, I can only speak to what I did, which was I heard the Batman run was really good, and I jumped in at issue 13 with Death of the Family, which started a new story arc. So I jumped in fresh, and then just kind of stuck with it, and my collecting grew from there. As I saw number ones that came out I was really interested in, I started reading more and more stuff. The problem is now you get to a point where you have long boxes of shit, and while it's kind of cool to have the collection, it can be overwhelming, all the stuff that you buy week to week and all the stuff that you maybe feel like you have to read that you're not totally invested in. So I would say, kind of similar to what Pat said, just read what you love and don't be afraid to cut things out. Don't keep collecting just to collect, because then you get in a situation like me where I'm getting ready to move and I'm like, why do I have all this shit?
Yeah.
So another recommendation for me would be, if you aren't into physical media, just do it on your tablet.
Yeah, Comixology is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about collecting paperback books, and I have stuff in my collection that I adore, and I'm very glad that I have physical copies of it. But that's probably 5 issues out of 5 long boxes. And then, of course, I have the stuff on my wall that I like a lot, but those are typically things that were signed. So you can go and you can go back and you can buy stuff that you really like, that you want to own physical copies of, but maybe start with the virtual one, the Comixology digital. Yeah. So kind of what I did with Redlands. Redlands. What I just talked about this episode was I read it on Comixology and I loved it so much that I bought it whenever I was at the comic book shop this week.
And that's a really good point that you made about cutting out, not being afraid to cut it out. Cause I've had that exact dilemma before. I consider myself a huge comic book nerd.
Yeah.
And it's this character is really important in the comic book universe. It's a popular character, but I don't really care about this book. So why am I continually buying it? And it's sitting on my shelf for 2 months before I actually read it. And I'm 3 issues behind at this point. So why am I even reading this? I've done that several times where I'll be literally reading a book and I'll be like, I don't give a fuck about this. Why am I still buying this book?
It's easy to become a completionist.
Yeah, for
which
sure.
is the hole I fall into, where I was like, well, if I stop now, I won't have the entire run.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, these books aren't going to be worth that much except for key issues, and it's not going to matter. So it's easier to just cut the cord sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So getting into the Ask Reddit questions, which I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Reddit, but I do occasionally go on there and browse and people post some interesting stuff. I generally don't post too much on Reddit. I've been shadow banned. I've had to come up with a new...
Jesus.
It's Reddit is kind of a bitch. Some of the people on there are just big old bitches. But anyways, so I do like getting on it occasionally, but I don't post very often because this is my second username because, like I said, I got shadow banned because they're a bunch of baby back bitches. But anyways, I did find some good nerdy questions on AskReddit that I think that we could have a pretty interesting conversation just going back and forth with. So the first one is, what video game could you not beat as a kid growing up? So I don't know if this is necessarily the best answer because I did eventually beat it, but I had a really, really hard time with it as a kid when I first started playing it. It's Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
It's silly because I had a hard time playing it for a really, really dumb reason. First of all, I love this game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I have to give my little brother credit. We would go and rent games every once in a while at Blockbuster or whatever. And he was the one that got me into this game. He was the one that picked it out. So I definitely do have to give him credit because he did have a good eye when it came to video games. And I really, really love this game. It was something that I got obsessed with the minute I played it. I thought it was so cool at the time that you could be this character and be kind of sneaking around. And it emphasized stealth in this game. And I thought that was really, really cool, that the fact that you could crouch against walls and tap to distract the guy to come over and you could sneak around him. I never played a game like that before, and I thought it was really, really cool. But right before the first boss battle in this game, you have to find an area of the wall that's a different color than the other areas of the wall, and you have to blow it up, and that leads you into the very first boss battle. And I could not find that area for the life of me. And I remember playing hours and hours of this game, going to the different floors and not being able to find this area. And it was pissing me off. And at the time, you could only rent a game for a couple of days before you would get late fees. And so I returned this game without finding that area. And it was years later before I actually ended up buying it, because I remember I asked for it for Christmas, and my parents not knowing anything about video games. There was a Metal Gear Solid, the main game, and there was a Metal Gear Solid VR Missions, which was just kind of like a super tutorial. It's actually a really fun game. For those that have never played it and are fans of this franchise, definitely pick it up because it was really fun. They got me that game, the VR Missions, instead. So I was kind of frustrated. I mean, it still ended up being a fun game, but it was definitely frustrating because I wanted to get back to playing that game. And so I don't think I ended up beating it until junior high. Really, really awesome game. If you have never played it, definitely check it out. So it's kind of silly because it was for such a stupid reason. And it was, once I found it, I was like, of course that's the area that I probably walked by that area a million fucking times. So it's super frustrating. But so that's my answer for the video game that I could not beat as a kid growing up.
Okay. This wouldn't be, I have two answers, but I'll be really quick because one of them's not really me being a kid. It was probably high school.
Okay.
And that is Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Okay.
And the frustration with that game came from, again, I talked about comics being a completionist. I want to complete everything in the game, and then I can say I beat it.
Yep.
And with a game that is put out by that studio, is it Bethesda that puts those out? Sure. Anyways, Oblivion or Skyrim or whatever there is just so much to do that you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
You basically just had to pick one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was on side missions. I played side missions for weeks and weeks before, and I'm like, I haven't even gotten to the main missions yet, and I never ended up beating it. And obviously, because there's just so much to it. As far as a game that I played growing up that I couldn't beat, that was extremely frustrating to me, was, I don't know if you ever played this or if you remember it, but Donkey Kong 64.
No, I never got around to that one.
So I was so excited for this game because, I mean, who doesn't like the Donkey Kong games from Super Nintendo? And
oh yeah, for sure.
This was the 64 version, and I was so excited. And it was so confusing because it was like open world.
Yep.
And there were 5 different characters. And I'm sure like if I went back and played it now, it'd make perfect sense to me. But my video game mind at the time was I've played Super Nintendo and it's side-scrolling games. And that's what I expect from my Donkey Kong games. And this was so confusing, did not feel like a Donkey Kong game, and was not fun. And I just never beat it, and I wish I would have, and I really wanted to beat it whenever I was playing it, but I just couldn't because I was so frustrated by it that I ended up never getting around to finishing it.
All right, cool, man. So the next AskReddit question, what shows had you hooked right off the pilot episode? I'm going to pick 2. I'm going to pick a drama and a sitcom. Both of them, I feel like really, really butchered the ending, one more than the other. The drama I'm going to pick is Dexter. We've talked a lot about this show, it being one of Tyler's favorite shows, and I hope I don't step on your toes with my answer, but I really liked the idea of a serial killer that kills people, but not just he kills people, he kills only bad people.
Yeah.
And then of course you throw in the extra layer that he's actually a cop and he kind of uses that position to help him find the people that he's going to kill. The pilot is great, but especially that first season as a whole is really amazing. And the comedy, the sitcom that I'm going to pick is How I Met Your Mother, because sitcoms are very rarely, the reason they're called sitcoms is because they're very rarely high concept. And I was just really blown away by the concept that the whole sitcom is about the story of how he met these kids' mother. And I just really thought that was really cool. And of course, they shit the bed with the finale, and we've talked about that a lot in the past. But if you look at that show in a vacuum and you don't think about the finale, which is kind of hard because it was so bad, it's still a really good show. And the pilot episode I thought was really fantastic.
So for me, the Dexter I wasn't going to bring Dexter up, but that is a good answer because that show did hook me. But for me, I'm going to say Game of Thrones, which is kind of an obvious answer given its popularity. But for me, it was kind of different circumstances because I was never into the idea of that show. Because as much as I love my buddies that I've had since grade school and high school, we all went to college together, so on and so forth. They like fantasy books and fantasy games, and I've just and never gotten into it. And I just kind of looped this in with one of those fantasy things they liked, and they talked about it constantly. And the first season was ruined for me because, spoiler alert, I found out, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones season 1 by now and you're listening to this podcast, what are you doing? But I found out Ned Stark dies.
Yep.
So that took away from it for me. So I was just like, oh, whatever. It's already spoiled for me. Doesn't sound like anything I'm interested in. But for whatever reason, I sat down and watched the first episode one day and was hooked on it ever since. And of course, it was number 2 on my favorite TV shows of all time. To try to think of a comedy off the top of my head that hooked me from the get-go, maybe, I mean, I hate to bring it up again second time on the podcast already, but maybe Rick and Morty.
Okay.
I'd love to be able to say that it was Parks and Rec because that's what was number 1 on my favorite shows of all time.
Is really bad.
But exactly. The first season's tough and you got to hang with it. So obviously that I wouldn't say that hooked me. Whereas Rick and Morty, I binged it pretty fucking quick after that first episode. So maybe that's the route I would go.
All right, cool, man. I mean, yeah, those are some good answers. I don't know if I was necessarily hooked from the first episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a slow burn a little bit, especially in that first season.
Yeah.
Once it gets going, once you kind of get introduced to these characters, it definitely hits the ground running, but I wouldn't say that I was absolutely blown away by that pilot episode.
See, for me, I was hooked on the cliffhanger. Like, Bran getting pushed out the window while
I forgot that happened in the pilot.
The brother and sister are having sex. Like, that was like, holy shit, what is going on? You know, let's keep watching and see where this goes. So,
all right, for sure. I've forgotten that actually had happened in the pilot episode. So the next AskReddit question is Gamers of Reddit. Which critically acclaimed video game did you find overrated and boring? I didn't mean for this listener question segment to be so much about video games. It just so happened to be that way. It's funny because we don't really talk a ton about our answers, especially when we don't discuss a ton about what we're going to talk about, whatever, on this podcast on each episode, just because we like everything to be fresh, like an actual conversation.
Yeah.
You brought up the Elder Scrolls video games, and that's actually one of the answers that I'm going to give. I never really gave them a legitimate shot, but I never got into the Elder Scrolls games. I remember the first being introduced to them when Morrowind was out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the first one, but yeah, I remember talking to my cousin about how much I really loved Fable, and I was really getting into it. And he was like, well, if you like Fable, you'll really like Morrowind because it's kind of a more intense version of that game. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I spent about 3 or 4 hours into that game, and I never got even close to the first part of it because I kept dying at this one part because you're basically just get dropped into this game and you have nothing. And I just kept dying over and over and over again. And I got so irritated that I just gave up on it. And so, yeah, I didn't really give it a legit shot, but I have never played those games since. I'm looking forward to Skyrim coming out on the Switch because I've heard that that's like one of the best video games of all time. So I'm definitely looking forward to putting a lot of time into that game. The reason I'm waiting for it to come out on Switch is because Switch is handheld and I can take it anywhere. So I don't feel as guilty really getting into that game if I can play it in the living room versus playing it in the room that we're currently in. Kind of my office is what we call it. So yeah, I'm waiting for that to come out on the Switch so I can really get into it. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, but I never really got into those games because of my frustrating experience with Morrowind. My second answer is, and I know this is not necessarily an acclaimed game, and I've talked a little bit about it before, is I hated For Honor. I really don't like that game at all. I'm not a huge fan of hack and slash games, and I had just played Rise Son of Rome right before I got For Honor, and that game is not great either, but I felt like I had just beaten a hack and slash game, and then I went straight into For Honor, and I was like, this is basically just the same game, and I just really just didn't get into it.
Yeah, good answers. I went through a few things. I actually had like the Elder Scroll games on there at one point, but I ended up taking it off because I think there is value there with those games. I would maybe say, so this, I'm just asking for backlash here, but
that's kind of the purpose of this question.
Almost anything Blizzard has ever put out.
Oh, really?
So even including Overwatch, which is a game I love. So the reason I say that, like, I got enjoyment out of World of Warcraft, and I get enjoyment out of Overwatch, but the way that people take these games and just run with them, and it's like the greatest thing ever created. Overwatch especially, as much as I love that game, at Indie PopCon, every other cosplay was an Overwatch character. The big draws of that con was the Overwatch voice actors. Yeah, and to me, it's like, it's a fun game, and I get enjoyment out of it, but it's a really simple game with not a lot to it, except for the characters. And, it's the same concept every round you play. There's not really a lot of variety in that game. So it blows my mind that Blizzard has these fanboys and fangirls that just create something out of honestly nothing. So it's a fun game. It's a great game. I love it. But the amount of acclaim that it's gotten puzzles me.
Did you ever play Warcraft? Not World of Warcraft or Warcraft?
Just World of Warcraft.
Oh, really? I enjoyed those games, but I do enjoy real-time strategy games.
Yeah, and I got enjoyment out of it, but again, it's just one of those things where people are still playing it, like, over 10 years later.
Yeah.
And, they're still making expansions. I can't get that. I can't get behind that. So I would say those games for sure, and then maybe just to put another game in there, like League of Legends or Dota, these games that people love so much that they watch other people play them. Like, I'm not going to bash e-gaming. Like, a lot of people I like real sports. I don't watch people play video games. Like, I'm not going to get into that because I do enjoy Twitch and I enjoy watching people play games. But the amount of fanfare that goes into watching people play League of Legends, I just don't get because it looks like a super boring fucking game. Like, show me some people, like, put fanfare behind something like Halo, and I would enjoy watching it maybe, but I just can't get behind the craziness that goes into those League of Legends tournaments.
Yeah, I've never played a single second of that game.
Yeah, and I don't plan to.
Yeah. So the last AskReddit question and the last question in our listener question segment is, if you knew an adult who'd never seen a film before, what would you recommend as their first experience? And for me, this is a really tough question because a lot of my favorite films, I think that your first instinct is to say, well, what's your favorite film? Like, just throw that out there. But like I've talked about before, I've seen a shit ton of movies, and a lot of my favorite films are films that kind of subvert a genre and kind of play on your assumptions as a moviegoer. Like, you assume that they're going to go down this one path, and they don't necessarily play on that so much, or there's not necessarily this huge twist or anything like that.
Yeah.
So if you've never seen a movie before, then that wouldn't really, those types of movies wouldn't really play for you, because you would just assume, oh, this is how all movies are. So it's a tough question for me. I also would, my second instinct would go with like a movie like Pulp Fiction, because that's such an amazing film. But again, it's kind of weird because it's non-linear storytelling. So again, I think I'm getting kind of too much in my own head about the never seen another film before.
Yeah, it's all right. I did too.
Because then I was thinking, well, maybe they would think that this is how all films are. And then you're kind of missing out on how brilliant that movie is. So I just went with a pretty obvious answer, just because I've described it as the perfect film, and that's The Dark Knight. Yeah, it's a comic book movie, but it's also the perfect like crime movie.
Yeah.
I think that you can sit down and you can nitpick any movie that's ever come out. Maybe, oh, well, I don't think a person would react like that. Like, I wouldn't react like that. Well, good thing you're not that character. So you can't really sit down and say, well, that's not how I would react. Now, of course, if they're obnoxious or you don't believe that that's a realistic character, then you can argue that. But there's nothing in that movie that I think you can sit down and really, well, that's a huge plot hole. I don't think there's anything in that. And I've seen that movie 1,000 times and I can't find that. So yeah, you could probably nitpick here and there, but I don't think there's any real big plot holes in that movie. And it's just a fantastic crime drama.
Yeah. I mean, Dark Knight's my favorite movie of all time. So it's hard to argue with you, but I am going to. So I got in my head about this like you did, because the obvious answer for me, like first thing to pop to the front of my brain was, oh, Star Wars. Duh.
Yeah.
But if you've never seen a movie in your life and you don't have anything to frame Star Wars around, does it play?
I had a similar
especially
idea.
In 2017, where you show somebody a movie made in 1977, are they going to appreciate it? And I don't think that you would. I also kind of went, I was like, oh, The Dark Knight, that's my favorite movie of all time. But then I started thinking, for me, a lot of The Dark Knight, about what I love about it, was set up in Batman Begins.
Sure.
And you can't,
that's a good point.
And you can't show them two movies. So they start with the number 2 in the trilogy. And I don't think they'd be lost by any means. But,
no.
But that kind of took me away from The Dark Knight. So I went through a lot of movies, and I think I'm going to go with something that's a classic and is, I don't want to say simple, but it is kind of simple and it's fun. And that would be Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay, cool.
Like you said, linear storytelling. So, I mean, it's not a confusing movie to follow, but it's a lot of fun, a lot of practical effects, a lot of humor. And that's kind of why I would put it out there. It's just a lot of things rolled into one. And it's just a fun adventure movie that would take a person on a ride that they hadn't experienced before, because they've never seen a movie before. And I feel like I might run into the same things with Star Wars, in that it's a bit dated. But
yeah, it is.
There's enough practical effects in it that you don't look at it and say like, wow, this is really cheesy. I think that there's still something to enjoy there.
For sure. All right, so want to put a bow on this?
Yeah, so bow on this with Nerd Favorite, you mean?
Yep.
So we'll move on to our last segment, which is Nerd Favorite, which we take turns asking each other really nerdy questions. Typically, what's your favorite blank? So you talked about Annabelle Creation.
Yep.
And you talked about your dislike for jump scares.
Yep.
But my mindset is that jump scares can be effective if they're done so in a way to elevate a movie.
Yes.
Elevate a horror movie. I think
there's good ways to do it. It bothers me. I say jump scares is kind of a blanket thing, but the things that bother me is when they're they're setting you up for a big scare, and it's like, oh, the cat jumps out.
Yes, 100%.
That pisses me off.
100%. I am right there with you. So that being said, I want to know what your favorite jump scare is.
Okay.
And I think we're both in a similar mindset to where it's not going to be, oh, and then the cat jumped out. It's got to be something that furthers the storytelling and takes the movie to the next level. At least that's what kind of went through my mind when I was trying to think of what my favorite would be. So mine's from a newer movie, and I don't know that it would be considered a classic. I think that you and I probably love it and consider it a classic, but maybe not in the realm of horror movies. But the movie The Descent.
Oh, yeah.
The first time you see one of the cave creatures.
Okay, I thought maybe you would go with, I guess it's not really a jump scare at the beginning where they have the car crash.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a good part, too, and that does obviously further the story. But for me, it's a slow build-up to what is going on in these caves and what are we leading to. And when they're going around the room with the night vision and all of a sudden the creature is just fucking there.
Yeah.
And that was one of the more scared moments I've had in a movie theater and was not expecting. So it furthers the storytelling because now you know what you're up against. And it also is great because it makes you pee a little. So that's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before. One of the movies that scared the shit out of me as a kid is From Dusk Till Dawn. And it's very similar to The Descent, and I've discussed this before, is you think you know what The Descent is because you've gone 75% of the way through the movie or an hour plus into the movie before the shit really hits the fan. And From Dusk Till Dawn is the same way. I didn't fucking know that was a vampire movie, and you don't know it's a vampire movie until you're about 75% of the way through the movie, and that scared the shit out of me as a little kid. But I think I'm going to go with a movie that I actually, when you posed this question 2 minutes ago, I thought you would actually go with, is Signs.
And I almost went with Signs, yeah.
I think people shit on this movie undeservedly so. I think this is really good. People kind of point to this as the first downfall of M. Night Shyamalan, which I don't think it is, because I think Signs is a really, really good movie. I think it's underrated, like I said. But the moment where he's watching the TV in the closet and the birthday party where the alien walks by, that scared the shit out. And it's still kind of, I don't want to say that it still makes me jump, but it still kind of gives me chills because it's such well done storytelling. Like I really appreciate it. It is the exact perfect example of a jump scare done well. Like it moves along the story. You get to see the alien for the first time, and it's just well paced. That scene, and the character that's watching the TV also jumps, which I think is that gives you that horror film shared experience type of moment.
Yeah, no, I remember I didn't see this movie in theaters. I saw it later on home video. And if I was in theaters, it probably would have had a bigger effect. But yeah, that moment, just seeing the alien, and it's so casual. Yeah. It like just walks by an alleyway, but it's so well done, and it takes you back. And yeah, that's a really good one.
All right. So that's it for episode 133 or 153, I think. Maybe it's 154. I don't know. Who cares? Anyways, as always, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. You can check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. You can comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerd You're Looking For. Check out our Twitch channel. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Nerds Podcast for both. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. You can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And finally, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.